You may already have a basic understanding of the ancient Greeks, their culture, the science and technology they used, and even about their gods and heroes. But how much do you really know about the everyday life of the ancient Greeks? In this video, we will take you to some of the insane facts about ancient Greece that you didn't know before. So stay tuned and enjoy the video. Slaves had to wear chastity belts. The Greeks did not want their slaves to spend their days making love instead of working. So, if you were a Greek slave, there was a good chance that your owner would force you to wear the chastity belt just to make sure. Many Greek slaves were forced to endure something called an infibulation. An infibulation is a thing where a metal ring is wrapped around your genitals and it closes them so tightly that even getting excited can cause pain. This metal ring can only be removed with a key. So, if your master forced you to wear this belt, you know it could have been much worse. It was really just another way of becoming a eunuch. People wiped themselves with stones. Toilet paper did not become widely available in Europe until the 1600s. Before that, Greeks had to come up with their own methods of cleaning themselves. Like Romans, they sometimes used a sponge on a stick to clean themselves, but not always. More often than not, they used stones. They had a pile of stones at the lavatories, and they grated hard stones against themselves to clean themselves. Hard stones were hard to find, so they had a saying, 3 stones are enough to wipe, that encouraged a bit of frugality when it came to bathroom cleanliness. In other cases, they took broken pieces of ceramic pots and scraped themselves with them. A particularly vengeful Greek would etch their enemy's name on a piece of ceramic pot, then shatter the pottery and use the broken pottery to wipe themselves. All this may be the reason why hemorrhoids were such a big deal in ancient Greece. The doctors tasted patients' earwax, vomit, and urine. In ancient Greece, when patients went to the doctor, they could almost always count on the doctors to reach into their ear canal and take a bite of earwax to taste it. That's how the doctor diagnosed their patient. Of course, doctors had more diagnostic methods than just tasting someone's earwax, but this is the most common method they used. After that, they would select a test based on what they found from the tasting. They also run their fingers through the phlegm in the patient's mouth, or lick the vomit to find out how sweet it is. All of this began with Hippocrates, the man who is behind the Hippocratic Oath. He believed that the body was made up of different liquids, and that each liquid had its own unique flavor. So Greek doctors learned what those liquids should taste like, so they could tell if something was wrong. In the Hippocratic way of medicine, urine tasted like fig juice. And if the urine didn't taste tart enough, the doctor knew there was something wrong, and he would conduct tests on that. The Olympics originated in Greece. One of the most interesting facts about Greece is that it is said to be the birthplace of the Olympic Games. More accurately, it is said that Greece is the inspiration for the modern-day Olympic Games. According to historians, the first Greek Olympiad was held in honor of a religious event in the year 776 BC. The games were held in honor of Zeus, the supreme god of Mount Olympus. The games held in the ancient Olympics were very different from what we are accustomed to seeing today. One of the most unusual games to modernize would have to be chariot racing. It certainly had the potential to be very bloody and dangerous. But the Greeks loved it. There was also a sport called pancration. It was a mix of wrestling and boxing, and in some ways, it was the first MMA competition in ancient Greece. Boxing was also a popular sport in the ancient Olympics. These combat sports did not have any weight categories like today. One of the craziest things about the ancient Greek Olympiad is that most of the athletes were nude. Only a few were there who wore thong-like restraints for their genitals. Older men would trade roosters for sex with boys. In ancient Greece, young boys were taken as lovers by Greek men. The older man always took the initiative and would appear before a young, immature boy and propose to him with a live rooster. It was a sure way to win the young man's heart at that time. The older man would act as a father figure to the new lover boy. He would teach him the way of the world. It might seem like a justification, but it wasn't. These men weren't sleeping with every boy they took with them. They chose only the best-looking boys, and the boy would be the elder man's companion at all times. This would go on until the boy starts to grow hairs on his face. When the older man sees that, he considers that as a sign of getting on in years and kicks the boy out. The boy then becomes a man, and now it is up to him to choose his own boy to keep the whole twisted tradition going. Athletes sold their sweat. Before a competition, Greek athletes took off all their clothing and covered themselves with oil. This is how they performed, whether it was a run or a fight with another man. At the end of the fight, they were usually covered in dirt. So, after the fight, they scraped all the sweat, dirt, and dead skin from their bodies. This would have been gross to watch, but it would have been even worse if you were helping out. A team of slaves would have to collect all of the scrapings from the athletes and bottle up all of the strange, unsavory things that fell from the bodies. The scrapings were then sold as medicine, and people rubbed the sweat of the athletes on their bodies. They believed it soothed all kinds of pains and aches, which probably didn't work very well. But at the very least, the Greeks, after rubbing the sweat and dirt off their bodies, began to smell like Olympians. Women's illnesses were treated in the filthiest ways possible. Greeks believed that women were more sensitive to unclean things than men. They also believed that unclean things affected women differently than they affected men. It wasn't just that women were more susceptible to unclean things. It was an idea that was part of their treatment. When a woman was ill, the Greeks believed there was no better cure than unclean and disgusting filth. For example, a woman with a discharge would drink a mixture of rasped mule poop and wine. In case of an abortion, cow dung would be applied to her. This is because of another strange belief that a woman's womb could move around inside her body, and they thought the smell of cow dung was so disgusting that it would make her womb run away. They held phallic parades. Every year, the streets of Athens were alive with the penis. Men and women marched down the streets, carrying gigantic phalli above their heads in honor of their god. It was part of the Dionysian celebration, a festival held in honor of the Greek god of wine. Dionysus's followers would get drunk and march to the temple in a phallic procession. They would sing songs about penises and shout obscenities at people as they marched. Aristotle argues that phallic processions are the origin of comedy, and that people turned the jokes they shouted during these parades into full-on stage plays. If this is correct, then all comedy begins with Greeks carrying giant cartoon dicks. Sneezing was promoted as an effective birth control method. Cyrannus, the Greek physician, taught that birth control is the responsibility of the woman. If a woman gets pregnant, he believed that it was the woman's fault. Hence, it was unreasonable to expect a man to do anything to prevent it. But in reality, if a Greek female got pregnant, it was probably the fault of the man, specifically that of Cyrannus. Since it is a woman's fault, according to the great Cyrannus, he told women that all they had to do to prevent pregnancy was squat, sneeze, and rinse. Of course, this did not work. But Cyrannus did have a few backup ideas. He suggested women to rub honey or cedar resin on the genitals of their partner before making love. And this idea worked to some extent in birth control because it discouraged people from making love in the first place. Cyrannus also told women to avoid sex during their period, which he thought was their most fertile period of the month. Women in Greece believed it and followed Cyrannus until they realized none of his ideas were working. They thought lesbians had giant clitorises. Ancient Greece was not the most progressive country when it came to women's rights. They did not believe in listening to women and had some very strange ideas. First of all, the Greeks did not understand lesbians. They could not imagine that two people could love each other without someone penetrating them. It was hard for them to believe that women did something else. As a result, they concluded that all lesbians must be born with giant clitorises. They called it the female penis and thought it was the reason for female homosexuality. This idea lasted much longer than it should have. Not more than a century ago, even Sigmund Freud thought that the clitoris was behind this whole lesbian idea. Before we wrap up, if you would like to know about the ancient practices we'd rather forget, click on this video. Thank you for watching the video, and if you like this video, please press the like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this.